Hello everybody. Welcome to the Eightfold Path to Poker Enlightenment. I'm Wayne Lively, and I'm here with my mentor Tommy Angelo, author of Elements of Poker. Tommy is a highly respected player, writer, and coach. He's been playing poker for a living forever.
Wow, has it really been that long?
Given the way you look, yeah.
Okay, I see how you're playing now. You know, there's something I want to ask you that I'm sure everyone is wondering about already.
Okay.
Is that your real voice, or did you steal it from James Earl Jones?
This is CNN.
Ooh, nice.
Are you going to be busting my chops all the way through this?
Oh, I just might. We'll have to see how it goes.
Well, after the crack I made about how you look, I guess I deserve it. This series is not about how to play poker, it's about becoming a poker player. It's for all poker players, regardless of whether you play internet poker or live poker. It doesn't matter what stakes you play or what games you play, whether you've been playing for months or years. If you play poker, this series is for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're looking at this as being sort of a supplement to all the great work that's on Deuces Cracked already. There's a lot of material out there about betting and betting strategy, which is obviously a very vital part of winning. And what we're going to be focusing on in this series is specifically non-betting topics, all the other ways that we can work on ourselves to play our A game more often.
What is the Eightfold Path to Poker Enlightenment?
Well, the Eightfold Path is the outline that Buddha came up with to share his discoveries on how to eliminate suffering. The core of Buddha's teaching is this thing called the Four Noble Truths, which we're going to go into later. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, which is basically the instruction manual that Buddha gave us to help us not suffer as much. And given that poker is such an endless source of suffering, it seems appropriate to apply it here. When Deuces Cracked invited me to make a video series, they told me that the seasons are 8 episodes long. And right away I thought, well, it seems like a good idea to explore the possibility of using the Eightfold Path. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take great liberties with Buddha's outline. We're going to change the names of some of the headings to make them more specifically about poker. For example, there's one episode going to be called Quitting, one about tilt. And then we're going to use some of the words and concepts from Buddha's teaching and aim them directly at poker for the purpose of helping us all play better and feel better while we're doing it.
So after this series, I'm going to play painless poker, right?
Well, I can't promise you that.
I was afraid you'd say that.
But I do think that you will play less painfully than you do now.
That sounds good to me. Let's walk right through the titles of each episode. The first episode is called Right View.
That's right, Right View. This one is about seeing things as they are, including yourself. It's about facing reality head on, about having no delusions and no distortions. The second episode is called Right Thinking, and this is about how to think in general about specific aspects of poker, such as bankroll and seat selection.
The third part is about right mindfulness.
This is, if I have to pick my favorite topic of them all, this is it. This is about being as aware as you can be and about paying attention. And these are the practices that lead most directly toward tiltlessness.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just lost my train of thought there. I really need help with all of those.
You and everyone else on the planet, that's for sure. It's amazing how some of these things teach us just how scatterbrained we really are, and then there's sort of a bootstrapping element. Once you realize how busy our minds are, then it can become almost like a hobby of discovery.
And then next is reciprocality, my favorite.
Yes, reciprocality is a word I reassigned to...
No, you made it up.
Well, I thought I made it up, and then I found it elsewhere on the web, but it's out there. But
they stole it, just like Carlin stole all my good lines.
Yeah, well, now you don't have to worry about that anymore. So reciprocality is a concept we're going to dedicate a whole episode to, and you'll hear about that when we get there.
And the fifth episode is called Right Quitting.
Yes, right. Quitting. This is a topic that when I first started coaching, it was just sort of in the works, a topic I always wanted to talk about with each client. And then right from the beginning, guys were coming back to me and saying, "Wow, that stuff we talked about quitting was so helpful." And so it gradually moved up and up and up in terms of how much priority I put on it, and rightfully so, because it turns out to be one of the topics that's been the most beneficial to the most people.
Have you ever advised one of your students to just quit poker altogether?
I have. I've advised students to take long breaks, and I've had a couple times where I thought the best option for someone was to give it up. But it turns out it wasn't so much because they couldn't win; it was just other life factors weighing in.
Like a doctor-assisted suicide?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, do me a favor and don't tell me until we finish this,
Okay.
all right?
So the next episode after that is right speech. This is about what to say and what not to say. A lot of good stuff there. And then after that is right action. And this is about being diligent and about giving it our best. And we'll go into a lot of specific things there.
And then the one that everyone is going to be waiting for, tiltlessness.
Tiltlessness. It's just amazing. I mean, I'm pretty sure that anyone who's played any amount of poker has asked themselves sometimes just what their results would be if it was possible to never tilt.
Well, of the 8 parts of the path, which one do you think is the most important?
Well, they all lead to tiltlessness. The way we're setting this up is that in the same way that the Eightfold Path, as was taught by Buddha, it's not sequential. You see this picture of the Dharma wheel. Each of the 8 parts of the path are represented by a spoke on the wheel, and they work together. So, one answer to your question would be to say that tiltlessness is the most important part of the path. But when it comes to what can we actually do that would be most likely to lead us on a path toward tiltlessness, without doubt, it's mindfulness.
Now, what you're telling me is I can't work on one until I get it right and then go on to the next one, right?
Exactly. This is not a case of work on right view until you've got that and then go to the next one. Right view comes into play all the time when you're talking about right speech. Having the tenets of right view established, or at least in the works and growing within you, leads itself to right speech. And by the same token, when you control yourself or do right speech, it leads to right view. So they all tie together.
It's kind of like poker. You can't work on folding or betting or raising or calling individually. It's all tied together.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons we're going to be referencing back to the various parts as we go.
And the cool part about this is you never finish with it.
Right. The way to look at this video series is it isn't the type of thing where you just get information and then move on. The ideal way, if someone wanted to really use this video series to help them be more tiltless and thereby help them make more money, the way to go about it would be to watch the whole thing and watch it again in a year and watch it again in 2 years and 3 years and take notes and each time if it speaks to you, there'll be different parts that mean different things to you. For example, if you do start doing some of the meditative practices we're going to go over, and then you do that for a year, when you come back and listen to the instruction again, you'll hear all new things.
Forever.
Forever. That's right. Forever.
Until you
exactly
die.
Right. Until you die. Right? Until you go ultimately broke.
Okay, Tommy, let's just dig into episode 1. Right view, what is it?
Well, I think for now, let's think of right view as anything that isn't wrong view.
All right, I'll bite. What's wrong view?
Well, we're going to define wrong view as anything that I say is wrong view.
But what if you tell me something is wrong view and I disagree? How do we know who's wrong?
Well, we won't know who's wrong, and we can't know who's wrong because, and this is one of the great mysteries of Buddhistic teaching, is that all views are exactly as right as they are wrong. In fact, that very view is right view.
And you're going to talk like this for all 8 episodes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm exhausted already. All right, give me an example of right view by way of wrong view.
Okay, a good example of wrong view is when we are results oriented, something that none of us can entirely pull away from, no matter how hard we try. It's when we base an analysis of a decision on how things turned out, rather than basing our analysis on the decision itself. This happens when we evaluate a betting decision, a quitting decision, and everything else. So right view would be to not be results oriented.
All right, that's well and good. So, what the heck can I do to undo my results orientedness? That almost seems impossible to undo.
Well, we're going to get around to how to fix this stuff, tilt and results orientedness and all that in a later episode. For now, let's just look at right view and wrong view, and we're looking at results oriented as an example of wrong view, just to see what they look like.
Okay, I think I saw a graphic example the other day, and you can tell me if this is right view or wrong view. I've taken up bowling, and I have a coach, and he teaches group lessons, and he set up a screen on the alley, and I bowled a game just using the arrows. Couldn't see the pins, just bowled for the arrows.
Mm-hmm.
A young guy who was in the group, he bowled, and I'm watching him, and as he let go of the ball, he runs around to see around the screen to see it hit the pins.
Funny.
And I told him, I said, just aim at the arrows and don't worry about it after that. This, to me, is a perfect example of being results oriented, where you're so results oriented you run around the screen to see what happens.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's wrong view, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and definitely results orientedness. I guess it'd be interesting if we could play poker and just not see how it comes out. Like make our river decision. Let's say a guy's betting all in on the river, and you have to decide either he's bluffing or not.
That's the way that the hand, examples on 2+2 and on deuces cracked, right? Where they don't put the results in at the end, so you're just concentrating on the play rather than the results.
Right. You're forced to be non-results oriented. When a guy posts a hand, he doesn't tell you how it turns out.
Now, being results oriented really does lead to tilt, doesn't it?
It does. It does lead to tilt. So let's stop for a second and talk about just what we mean by tilt and what specifically we're going to mean by tilt in this series.
All right, let's talk about it.
Traditionally, tilt has been used to mean emotionally involved. Come off. Wheel flies off.
Blow your stack.
Right. Some sort of emotional aspect has always been attached to the word tilt, and we're going to use it in a much more general way. We're going to define tilt as any non-A game performance. Period.
Okay.
It could be because you're tired. It could be because you're emotionally distraught. It could be because you're under bankrolled. Doesn't matter what the cause. Any non-A game performance for that individual, we are going to define from here forward as tilt.
I'm kind of the kind of guy who sees things in a logical fashion. To me, anything that changes your good decisions to making bad decisions is tilt.
Perfect. Yes.
So everything in this series, we're going to tailor to whether you're making good decisions, whether you're making bad decisions, whether you're on your A game or whether you're playing your C game.
Good decisions by your own judgment. In other words, we can't, tilt is going to be, it's all...
Of course, if it's my judgment, it's right.
Right, exactly. So back to results-orientedness causing tilt.
Right.
Okay. What results-orientedness does is it affects our evaluation. So let's say that a guy bets all in on the river, you're playing no limit, and you got to figure out, and you've just got one pair, you got to figure out if he's bluffing or not. And if all the parameters and all your judgment makes you think, okay, they're against his range, and the pot, and you take it all into account, I should call. So you go ahead and you call, and it turns out he had the nuts. Okay. Now, results-orientedness is going to immediately affect your own evaluation of that play. So you're going to.
How does it affect your play?
Well, you're going to think you made a worse play than you actually did.
Okay.
Because it didn't work out. That's what results-orientedness does. So this is how it can lead to tilt. Because one of the things that makes us tilt is when we think we made a bad play. So results-orientedness can lead to tilt so quickly because we make a play, we think it was the right play when we made it. The results come out, it didn't work out. So we immediately temper our judgment and think, okay, damn, I misplayed that hand. So now, because it was a huge pot, it's plaguing you 15 minutes later. You think, oh, I never should have called that bastard. And so that's where results-oriented can actually make us tilt by bringing us down in the dumps of thinking we played bad.
And we start chasing losses.
Right. Well, that's one of the effects of tilt. We're looking at many series of cause and effect here, but yes, one of the only effect of tilt is it makes us play bad. That's it. Doesn't matter what the cause is.
Making the wrong decisions.
Right.
Exactly.
Makes us play less than our A game.
Now, a long time ago, you came up with something called the professional. This is how we can keep on an even keel, making good decisions, right?
Yeah, the professional is sort of like my little angel that sits on my shoulder. He's like my guiding light or whatever you want to call it. The professional is in my book called Elements of Poker. And it goes back to the idea of trying to play my A game all the time, or as much as I possibly can. And it's like, so who is to say what my A game even is? And when I started realizing that, yeah, I can turn to great writers and great thinkers and this and that to get their ideas, but only I can truly know when I'm playing my best or not. And so I come up with this idea of the professional is like, what if there was a guy who had to make money at poker or die? That's it. If he didn't make money playing poker, he would die. And so all of his decisions are going to be based on his poker. What he eats, when he sleeps, what he thinks, anything within his control is going to be, it's all metagame for this guy, this fictional character. And so I turn to him in an imaginary way and ask, okay, what if all my decisions were based on maximizing my poker profit? What would I do? And where it really comes into play, one of the areas that helped me was how I would behave. So here I am, playing at Lucky Chances or Artichoke Joe's or Bay 101, and it's like, I realize I don't want to ever say anything bad about the casino. People constantly badmouth the casino they play in. Oh, the food's bad, the dealers are bad, blah, blah, blah. Well, if I'm there to make the maximum amount of money possible, I want all the players to come here. I want there to be lots of bodies. I want the dealers to be happy. I want everybody to works there making money. And I want players to be coming there and think it's a good place to play so that they'll come back. So the last thing I would want to do in this entity of the professional is say anything bad about the casino, ever. Even if I felt something bad about it. So this is an example of how stepping outside of myself and thinking about what if all my decisions, including what I say, were based on profit, what would I say? What would I do? So that's what the professional is. He's someone to turn to in that way.
So I've played with you, and I know how you play. And it's from, I guess, all these years of experience and all, you don't lose it. It's just you are super, super calm, at least on the outside. I have no idea what's going on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I know what's going on the inside of me, and it's turmoil.
We all know.
It's volcanic. Well, of course everybody knows because they're
Right.
going to hear about it.
Exactly.
So how do we keep that inner peace and inner calm at the table?
Well, there's a lot of ways. For me, it's been a long, slow journey. I basically, because of shame, I worked on hiding my inner turmoil long before I learned how to actually not experience it. Because for me, I felt it was much more profitable. The guys that looked like they were strung out and upset, they looked to me like the easy marks. So I tried not to look strung out and upset, even when I was. Another thing I would do is I would look at the guys who instilled fear in me and who I thought were the strong players and just try to mimic their behavior. Well, the guys that were calm, as we all know, poker, that it's a winning attitude, it's a winning approach. But in terms of actually how to do it, again, I'm going to kind of defer that to a later episode. When we get into the mindfulness episode and the tiltlessness episode, we are going to go into some actual how-tos of what you can do at the table to calm yourself.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we listen to some very calming music? And when we come back, we'll get even more into this.
That's a great idea. Okay, Wayne, let's try something. Tell me about a hand you played, and I'll tell you where I hear wrong view.
Okay. There's this hand that I played last night. It's been bugging me all day.
Wrong view. The whole idea of being bugged all day by a hand is something that you want to get rid of.
Let it go.
Let it go.
Okay. The game was limit hold'em. I was totally card dead, getting no good starting hands at all. And then I finally get pocket kings.
Finally is another wrong view word. Anytime you're thinking that you're playing, you're like, oh, I finally got this, or he finally lost, that's a wrong view word.
There was this total fish at the table.
Bad, bad, bad. There's no fish at the table. Those are, in fact, you don't even want to think of them as humans. The best way of thinking of your opponents is like trees on a golf course. They're just in your way. But fish, donk, all of those words, bad view, wrong view.
Yeah, sure. He was in early position and he limped with his usual trash.
Again, highly judgmental word, all parts of wrong view.
It was folded to me on the button and I raised. Both blinds folded, and now we're heads up. I'm waiting for the ace to come as it usually does when I've got a big pair.
Well, I think you know by now that the whole idea of having a big pair and waiting for an ace to come is terribly, terribly wrong view.
Interrupting me shows you have a big pair. I luck out and the flop comes king, queen, 8 with 2 spades, but both of my kings are red. The fishy limper donk bets. I hate donk bets.
So, well, okay, hating anything is wrong view. What is a donk bet?
That's where some idiot bets into the razor.
So what do you ever do that? You mean they bet out into the razor?
Oh, no, I'm not an idiot.
So what determines whether it's a donk bet isn't when they do it. It's like how bad they play when they're doing it?
No, it's really, it's a donk bet is leading into the razor.
Okay, so a good player can make a donk bet, but you hate the donk bet.
Of course.
Right. Okay.
Of course. See, it's a donk bet if it's against me.
Right. Gotcha.
It's a lead bet if
I
it's me
see.
doing it.
I see. Okay.
So I raise him and he calls. The turn card's a blank. The limper checks. I go ahead and bet my top set, and he calls. The river's a 6 of spades, just exactly what I was afraid of.
Again, the right view, we've been talking about nothing wrong view, but the right view is, as we said in the introduction of the whole series, is looking at reality as it is. There's no room for fear. One of the reasons that the Buddhist teaching is known for literally evaporating all fears, including the fear of death, is because it's the act of just looking at what it is. The river was a 6 of spades, period. That's it. That's right view.
Okay, so this flush came in. He checks again. I expected him to bet, but he didn't. So when he checks, I says, maybe I've got some value here. So I go ahead and bet, and he calls. I proudly turn over my set of kings.
There's no room for pride.
And he shows a flush. There's no room for disappointment here either. I muck, and in the chat box, I type, nice catch, moron.
Well, was he really a moron?
He was to me. And then I think, man, I should have checked the river. I suck at poker.
There might be some truth to that last part.
Okay, now we're going to move into the gray area. Tommy, what is the gray area?
The gray area is the place between light and dark.
Okay, it's the gray matter between my ears. No, I mean, seriously, what is the gray area?
The gray area is a term I use to refer to that part of poker strategy evaluation when you just don't know what the right play is or was, and you never will. It just can't be known, and it's built into the nature of the game.
Does this go along with your great quotation, as far as I'm concerned, that the decisions that bother us most matter the least?
Precisely. Let me just explain that. By matter the least, I mean have the least amount of EV, plus or minus. So let's say you're faced with a decision that somehow you were able to know, after the fact that it was exactly 50-50, that it was your turn to either check or bet, and the EV of checking was exactly the same as betting, which is built into the game that happens quite a bit. It's close. These are, by their nature, the types of decisions that are going to trouble you the most, meaning you're going to wonder afterwards, which way should I have gone? And typically, one of the ways these decisions play out on message boards is, let's say a guy posts a hand, and the reason he even posted is because he was tortured by it, didn't know which way was right. And so he posts the hand, and let's say you've got 20 experts on the site, and all of them write about what they think they should have done. 10 of them write he should have checked, 10 of them write he should have bet. What that means is now we have scientific data, like a poll, that proves that this was an even money decision. Now,
but they're both right.
They're both exactly as right as they are wrong.
Right.
The EV is exactly the same. But look what happens, though. If you actually look at the wording of the people who took one side or the other, they won't say. Every once in a while somebody will say, but very few of the people will say, I believe that is an even money decision and it doesn't matter what you do. What happens is, in our minds, we're trained to latch onto one side or the other. It's built into human nature. So the people will say, oh, I think he definitely should have checked. And guys just as smart and experienced will say, oh, I think he definitely should have bet. But neither one of them has logically should be so adamant about their position, because it's inevitable that some decisions are going to be nearly break even, and it's also inevitable, just because of how we are, that the vast majority of hands never even get posted about. Like 7 deuce under the gun at Limit Hold'em. Nobody ever posts that and says, hey, what do you think we should do? Because everybody knows the right play. There's no gray area on that one. So the hands that get posted about are the same hands that bother us as we're evaluating, are the ones that are close to even. And that's how it should be. You would expect that. So that's what the gray area is, that center region. And we might be talking about a case where the EV versus the two options might be 55-45. Even in that range, we can't know. A lot of times we can't know. It might be that the EV was 55, but it's still impossible for us to know a lot of times because of the nature of as everybody says, it's a game of incomplete information. So the gray area is something, what I tell guys is, you want to not get bogged down in it. You don't want it to clog up your mind while you're playing. Keep in mind, all we're talking about here is how to have your mind fresh and open so you can be tiltless, right? Well, if you're sitting there playing and one of these close decisions comes up, and you're sitting there trying to figure it out, and you might even be playing while you're typing. Hey, Joe, what do you think I should have done? All you're doing is you're stuck in the quagmire of the gray area. And so all it does is bring us down. So what I suggest is learn how to recognize that, first of all, just believe and accept that a lot of the decisions are very close and you'll never know what was right or wrong. And then recognize when you've come upon one of those and analyze it, try to figure out what you think you should have done, but let it go fast and move on and come back to the moment and play the next hand.
For the message board, that's the highest EV possible, though. So those are the ones that they argue about.
Oh, yeah,
so
you get great value out of it.
Yeah,
that way.
So basically,
absolutely.
if it's a big, long thread over a decision,
right,
gray area, just move along.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but you get guys ready to fight to the death over which, and if you ask those same people who are some of their top thinkers, and you said, do you believe that there are a lot of even money decisions? They would say yes. And then you say,
this just doesn't happen to be one of them.
Yeah. Wouldn't you expect that the ones that are split decisions would be like evidence that this particular decision was close? And they would probably say, well, yes. And I was like, so how can you be so adamant that you're right?
And so Tommy Angelo comes along and says, you're both right, you're both wrong, it's a toss-up decision, move along, and kills the thread.
Yeah, well, it's more than just that it's a toss-up decision. It's that you can't even know. That's the crazy part about this game. That's why, if I may quote myself again, is one of the ways I try to say this in a funny way is that 75% of all poker players think they play better than the other 75%. One of the things that makes this game what it is the gray area is so huge that allows any of us to over-evaluate our own play. So that if you added up like a percentage, like if you ask somebody, where do you think you rate 1 to 100 in all players? Well, In actuality, if you average that out, it would come out to, average of 50%. But if you added up the numbers people actually gave you, it would be more like 75%.
I think it was Nolan Dalla who said that poker and sex are just alike. Everybody thinks they're better than they are. The other day I was playing and I sat down at a table and it was absolutely full of donkeys. Okay? Now, yeah, I knew that I can beat every single one of them at the table. Now, is that an example of right view or wrong view?
Well, it's an example of wrong view in this way. I like to draw a very clear distinction between the words judge and evaluate. So, let's say you're a professional poker player and it's your job to put yourself in positive EV situations. You need to be good at determining when you have the best of it. And that's going to be a combination of evaluating how well you play, how well your mindset is at that moment, what your opponents are doing, and you think, okay, right now, I rate to have an advantage over these people right now, based on your data, okay, or your assumptions. That would be evaluating. And then you could say, so I should play in this game. Judging is when you bring in words and ideas like, I'm better than them, or they suck, or any of those types of words move toward wrong thinking and they get in the way. Because what happens is once you attach to those types of judging ideas, it detracts from your ability to honestly evaluate. An example might be, let's say that you are playing against donkeys according to your evaluation at that time, but the reason that these three guys were playing so bad is because they just came from a stag party and they're drunk and they don't care. And then the next week you go in and the same three guys are there and they had just woke up and they're fresh and they happen to be really good players. And in your mind you're attached to this idea that I'm better than them. And so it clouds your judgment and makes it impossible for you to truly evaluate the ongoing unfolding situations as they change.
Now we come to the part of the program that you've told me was very important, that we needed to cover in depth. Improving from the top up and the bottom up. What does that mean?
What it means is it's a different approach to how you spend the energy that you put toward improving your score. Normally we think of, when we work on our poker game, we want to work on learning how to bet better, maybe work on some other, bankroll management and all this, but we're basically working on our A game. We're thinking, okay, here's my A game. How can I make more when I'm playing my A game? And that's what I would call improving from the top up. My idea of right view on this topic is to take half the energy that you would spend working on your A game and work on your C game and improve from the bottom up at the same time. So let me ask you, what do you think your earn rate is when you're at your absolute worst?
Probably about 2 big bets an hour.
Minus 2 big bets an hour. Okay. Yeah. So if you were to work on your C game and make it so that when you're at your worst, you're only losing 1.5 big bets an hour, and then work on it some more where you're only losing 1 big bet an hour, that's what I mean by improving from the bottom up. So you do this at the same time. Now, one of the beautiful things about this approach is as you spend less and less time in your C game, you're spending more time in your A game. So that the time that you do spend working on your A game in all the traditional ways, you're getting a higher return on because you're employing it more often.
And spending more time there.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
There are, I'm sure, many times that me and other guys out there, when we're in our C game, wipe out the wins that we had playing our A game and do it a lot faster too.
Right, much faster. And we're going to spend more time on that in the next episode about lopping off the C game. But the idea here under right view is just this idea of willfully taking some of your improvement energy, I call it, and instead of spending it all on working on your A game, is consciously spend some of it making your C game so that it doesn't lose as much, let's say, so it gradually improves.
Give me some of the ways that your clients have a C game.
Okay, well, there's so many. The classic is, you get stuck and you try to chase your loss and start playing looser. That's always the biggest, most prominent leak, is playing more hands before the flop. So if someone were to, a lot of this has to do with awareness. We're going to be talking a lot about awareness as we go along, but you need to be able to step outside yourself, ideally while you're playing, but at least in between sessions, and recognize, okay, and say these words to yourself. When I'm stuck, I play too loose. So what I need to do to work on my C game is work on playing tighter when I'm stuck.
What are some other things that people play for C game? Bad beats.
Bad beats. In terms of what generates C game, bad beats. And what I found, talking to so many people about this, is actually when they play bad. A lot of guys tell me, well, I can handle the bad beats pretty well because they have a realistic idea about the luck element. But when they make bad plays that they know are bad, so it's like compounding tilt. So you have to evaluate and know, okay, when I make a bad play, I'm very harsh on myself, and then that increases the probability that I'm going to have more C game.
And playing tired.
Playing tired, yeah, definitely. Playing tired, playing too long.
Drinking too much.
Yeah, there are many things.
Well, my bad one is tapping on the aquarium, berating the fish. I know that I'm not the only one that does it because I could read a chat box. There's an awful lot of guys out there that are doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's monstrously wrong view to criticize other players, but I want to kind of put a little spin on this you might not have heard before. The typical teaching that we hear on this topic is you shouldn't make fun of the bad players, you shouldn't criticize their play while the game's going on, because one of two bad things can happen. Either you'll coerce them into playing better, or they might quit. And I believe this is wrong view. Everything I just said there, I feel very strongly is wrong view, and I'll explain why. I wrote about this a long time ago, and I called it good advice, wrong reason. The example I give is, let's say I say, okay, you shouldn't hit yourself in the head with a hammer because you might hurt your head. It's like, that's good advice, good reason. You shouldn't hit yourself in the head with a hammer because you might break the hammer.
That would be me.
Right. But that's good advice. It's the same advice, but it's the wrong reason. So carrying that over to what I just said, it's good advice to say you shouldn't criticize bad players. But the reason that's typically given, that you might wisen them up or they might quit, is in my opinion wrong reason. The reason you shouldn't criticize bad players is because you shouldn't criticize any players, because it's just an ungracious, ungenerous way to treat another living human being. So if your motive for not making fun of bad players is purely profit, if you say, boy, I think this guy's a complete idiot, I want to say something terrible to him, but I'm going to bite my tongue because he might quit if I do, well, great. But there's a much higher road to take, which would be, I'm just not going to criticize him because he's a fellow traveler on planet Earth, and I just don't want to treat people that way.
There's also a much lower road to take in that it's not going to do them any good because that's why they're fish. In this episode, we've covered three main themes: how I view myself, how I view my opponents, and how I view my play.
To take a right view of ourselves means to look at ourselves with no delusions and no distortions. It means to be able to step outside of ourselves and observe ourselves in a situation and be able to objectively evaluate what we're doing without emotional entanglement. So this is the rightest view of all that can help us at the poker table or anywhere we are, especially if we find ourselves struggling with strong emotions that we wish we didn't have. For example, driving. Driving is one of the most irritating things we do, and a lot of people who are otherwise very calm and compassionate are in the habit of losing their cool when they're driving. So right view does not say you should be good all the time or you should improve yourself. Right view is just the act of being able to view yourself and being able to say, I am angry now, without saying there's something wrong with me for being angry. It's a purely objective stance of observing what is. Right view doesn't say that there's something wrong with emotion, but it does say you're better off if you can label your emotions and know them and just see them as they are.
How I view my opponents.
How you view your opponents, this goes back to what we were talking about the difference between judging and evaluating. One of the analogies I like to use that I touched on earlier is if you were playing golf and there's sand traps out there and there's trees and there's rough. If you hit the ball into the tree, typically we don't go up to the tree and actually yell at the tree, and maybe Wayne does, but that's how you want to think of your opponents. They're an obstacle. They're in the way of your objective, which is to walk out with more money than you walked in with. And so no matter what the opponents do, if you think of them as just trees on the golf course or even blades of grass on the golf course, then it's possible to take the right view toward them and not hold them accountable or be emotionally involved with them. And then you'll be in a situation where you can actually evaluate yourself more accurately and evaluate them more accurately to determine how profitable the game is and how you're doing.
And finally, how I view my play.
The way to view your play in right view is to be constantly aware that you have different levels of performance. There's A game, B game, and C game. And so what right view does is it doesn't just pretend that you're in the A game all the time. It with open eyes is aware that everyone has a C game. Everyone's C game is not the same, but every person has their best and they have their worst. If somebody's worst happens to be not very bad, well, that doesn't mean they don't have it. So everyone has a C game. So right view, when it comes to viewing your play, is first of all being aware of the different levels you perform at and being aware which ones you're in. And then another aspect of right view when you're playing that has more to do with the details of the game is knowing your actual weaknesses and strengths within the betting strategy, of knowing that you're very comfortable when it comes to, say, calling a big bet when it's a bluff, but you might not be comfortable when it comes to being the person who puts the big bluff out. And that's just one example of there can be millions of others of again, with no delusions and no distortions, being able to step outside your own play and your own strategy long enough and well enough to give it a good evaluation. Okay, Wayne, we're coming to the end of right view. You got another hand for me?
I do. Here's a hand I played last night at the Venetian. The game was $1, $2 blinds, no limit. I had pocket jacks under the gun. I opened the pot for $8. Everyone folded around to the big blind, and he called. My profile on him was that he's probably a losing player, but he never loses very much at one time. The flop came ace-6-2. He checked. I wasn't all that worried that he had an ace or not, because I figured if I bet, I'd find out. So I bet 15. He thought about it for a while and called. I couldn't tell if he was thinking about folding or thinking about raising, so I decided I was going to check behind if he checked the turn. The turn was a 6. He checked, and I checked as planned. The river was a 10. He bet out 30 into the $50 pot. I had no idea what he had. I figured I had a better hand than I had represented, so I called. He turned over pocket tens. I had him beat all the way, and he hit his 2-outer on the river. I could have moved him off the hand, and if I'd bet the turn, I suppose, but checking made a lot of sense too. I felt pretty good about how I played it. I just put out my big blind and got ready for the next hand.
Wow, Wayne. I'll tell you, if anybody ever wants to hear what right view sounds like, all they have to do is listen to that. I mean, how you viewed yourself, how you viewed your opponents, how you viewed your play, honest evaluation. You know, when I was listening to you, the thing that is interesting is that if somebody just listened to that story, you think, okay, well, it's just a poker hand, just a story. You don't really notice what's missing. You know, what makes something right view is the lack of wrong view, the lack of the judgment, the lack of the emotional attachment to pocket jacks. You know, it's the things that would be added onto your story that would convert it from right view to wrong view. But when it's lean, when you just tell the story and you say things honestly, like I didn't know what he had, and things like, well, I could have played it a different way, but you know, I played it how I did it, and on to the next hand. Just beautiful. Lots of right view in there.
And boring. And that brings us to the end of episode 1 of the Eightfold Path to Poker Enlightenment. We'll be back with episode 2, Right Thinking. Thanks, Tommy.
Thanks, Wayne.